Point of order, Your Worship. My apologies for this.
Point of order, Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, members. Look, in light of the last item, we were talking about elected members and also talking about staff and the relationship and interaction with staff. And it is in that vein and bringing both together that I wish to acknowledge Lisa Toka, just to acknowledge her birthday is today. So I just wanted birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa. Happy birthday to you. Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! Very good. Thank you, Chair. And that was my point of order.
That was the most contentious point of order I've had to deal with in my time here.
And just a supplementary, I understand it could be Councillor Collins' birthday today.
Oh, right.
Times two. Yeah.
I'm on the video. I want to see him on the video.
Councillor Collins, if you're on the call, I think you should put your video camera on at the moment. Hey.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So we'll count the last song as being for both of you, both you and Lisa. That's an economy of scale. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Happy birthday.
Councillors, we are now on item number 16, so I'm going to ask Michael Burns and Justine Yu to come to the table, please, and Ross. He's a bonus that wasn't on my list. This is the regional fuel tax, and it's to note the feedback from public consultation to adopt in principle the projects that will be covered under this, but because many of the people doing the consultation made this mistake, I'll mention it here so that we don't do the same thing. This is not about setting the level of the regional fuel tax. It's not about the length of time that the scheme will run for, and it's not about the area covered by the tax. This is purely the areas that the payments from the regional fuel tax will go towards, having regard to the fact that two of the big projects under the regional fuel tax, which is Penlink and Mill Road, are now being covered almost exclusively by the government. So I'll move this. I'll ask Councillor Deputy Mayor Cashmore to second it, and I'll invite Michael to talk to the paper.
Thank you. Kia ora. So, as the Mayor said, we've been out for consultation alongside the Regional Land Transport Plan, and we received feedback from over 4,500 submissions on the RFT. As the Mayor's mentioned, many of those submissions and comments were outside of the scope of the consultation, but we've had a look at those that were in, and of the relevant comments, there was a high level of support for the proposal, and particularly a high level of support for public transport, walking and cycling projects. This aligned closely with the draft proposal, where over 80% of the spend was directly targeted to mode shift or to road safety. Additionally, many of the other projects, such as road corridor improvements on Lincoln, Lake and Glenvar roads, are focused on adding transit lanes, walking and cycling facilities and or safety improvements. We received some negative feedback around a perceived reduction in funding for active transport. So while the specific project line within the scheme has reduced, the overall spend on active modes is maintained through the integration of walking and cycling facilities into other projects such as the Connected Communities projects or the roads I've just mentioned. We received feedback from all the local boards on the proposal, and apart from the exempt Aotea Great Barrier, all local boards supported the proposal. Feedback from the boards was along the same lines as the public submissions, supporting additional investment in mode shift and advocating for local projects. The Regional Transport Committee considered the feedback on Monday and no significant issues or concerns were raised. So what we're recommending today is that, subject to the final decisions of the Regional Land Transport Plan, that the allocation table included in the draft proposal form the basis for a final variation proposal to ministers. And we're also recommending that the approval of the final proposal is delegated to the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Chair of the Planning Committee. So thank you. Open for questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. And the critical page of the document is page 13, attachment A. And if you go through that, there are 14 items. It's bus priority improvements, bus infrastructure, it's the airport access road, which includes cycling and the bus lane. It's the Euston Busway, it's park and rides, it's electric trains, it's ferry network, it's road safety and active transport. Penlink and Mill Road are reduced to 9 million between them, money that's already committed. And then there's road corridor improvements, things like Glenvar, Lake Road and Lincoln Road. And it's pretty hard to see actually that this is other than very much focused on mode shift. And that's the objective of what the fund was proposed to be for, and that's what it's absolutely delivering, more so than ever, given that Penlink and Mill Road have now been subsumed in the New Zealand upgrade program. So we'll open up for questions first of all, and we'll begin with Councillor Coombs, and then Councillor Wayne Walker following.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Kia ora koutou. I've got two questions that maybe I'd like to do in two parts, because the second one I think is more for the Chief Executive. In terms of the feedback, the report does say that it was opposition of the proposal primarily related to the reduction of funding for active transport, and that was also came through the local board feedback. And I appreciate there is a response, and you've just addressed that too, Michael, but it concerns me that we go through a consultation process and then we don't actually take on board any of that feedback, and it's essentially the same out the other end. And so that's not really, I don't find really adequate kind of response to that strong feedback. And I take on board, the Mayor's comment that this is primarily focused at active transport, but this does require us, primarily focused on mode shift. But that doesn't, there's kind of a leap of faith that we have to have that activity class is actually being reduced.
So through the chair, just a couple of points. The feedback was around the specific project line in the 14 projects the Mayor just stepped through, is the active transport project line, and yes, the amount of funding towards that project line has reduced. As I mentioned earlier, there's spend on a number of other projects, including the Connected Communities, which sits under the bus priority improvements, which has integrates walking and cycling as well. The same feedback has gone back to the Regional Transport Committee for the Regional Land Transport Plan. And as I mentioned earlier, this what we're looking to adopt is this allocation table subject to the finalisation of that plan. And if through that plan, the change in funding for active transport increases, that would, or is moved to active transport, that would flow through into the allocation of this funding.
Thank you. So that needs to be part of our feedback. We need to make sure that's really clearly made in terms of the RLTP feedback and our discussion at the Planning Committee. Okay, I'll follow that up. Thank you. And my second partai, and I think this has to be directed at the Chief Executive, because I don't want to personalise this to anybody who might have been involved in the drafting, but I have to ask this thinking about all those people who have got our back and have put the wind in our sails around the climate emergency and getting our climate plan nailed. And we have a climate impact statement that makes absolutely no sense. It just, when you think that transport is our biggest emitter of carbon emissions, we've got to aim towards 50% reduction in the next 10 years. There's no reference to the plan or what role transport has. So Mr. Chief Executive, I say this very just robustly, respectfully, but can we please, well, I guess there's two questions, is how do we get a statement like that makes no sense? And secondly, are you looking at what resourcing we need in the organisation? What position do we need in the ELT who has responsibility and the resources and the knowledge to be able to ensure that we are writing statements that make sense in the context of our strategies and plans and obligations? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Firstly, can I just acknowledge the point that you're making relative to the importance of this subject and its impact on climate? Then I think we could have written something much more clearly than what we have. So let me acknowledge that. Secondly, one of the things that I've in conjunction with Megan done is elevate the position of the Chief Sustainability Officer to a direct report to her. I think it deserves a higher profile in the organisation. The subject is too important and it needs more attention and potentially more resources. So that has our attention and I am committed to acting on that.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker. Mic on, please.
Just got a question around the bus priority improvements. Does that also include T2 and T3 laning?
My understanding is that is part of it. The key part within that bus priority improvements is the new Connected Communities project and focus that's been coming through the draft RLTP and is for consideration in the final there. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Cooper.
It was just a question, when you've got the list of road safety and then you look at active transport as considerably less, are there elements of the road safety work that actually make it safer for cycling and walking in there? Working? Well, it could be walking to work. I won't say what.
So yes, I mean I think there's key items there, including the speed limit changes, and many of those other items, red light cameras, that would enhance safety for all road users.
Thank you. Councillor Kathy Casey.
Thanks, Michael. My comments are almost similar to the ones I made on the RLTP yesterday, and it's quite good. I was listening carefully to your answer to Councillor Coombe with regard to how this is going to be finalised. And it relates to, I was having a look, I started with the Puketapapa local board who want more footpaths and they want renewals to footpaths, and I raised that yesterday. And I also asked a load of questions through the chair about that. But I was reading through all the local boards and almost all of them talk about footpaths or walking. And I'll leave cycling aside just for a minute. I'm just specifically talking about walking. And I think the question is how much of the regional fuel tax funding will go towards footpaths and how will that be allocated? You don't need to answer me now, but just consider that the same question I asked yesterday, I'm asking again because it's critical and it's supported by, I would say, the vast majority of local boards. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, thank you for that comment. What we're looking at here is basically, in some senses, that where you allocate the RFT to is relatively arbitrary. You could put it in any part of the project. What was critical about the regional fuel tax is that we had no ability in the last long-term plan to match the contribution made by the government to maximise the subsidies that we could get through Waka Kotahi. What we've done with the regional fuel tax is replace the interim transport levy, which was uniform on everybody, regardless of how often you used the road, with something that's a bit more focused on raised by the amount of time you spend driving on the roads. And that raised the equivalent of what we would otherwise have to have done with an 11% increase in our rates, which was unconscionable and unfair, because if you're a retired person who never goes out, you're paying the same amount potentially through your rates as the person that's using the arterial routes every day. So this had a bit more of a user pays focus, and kind of will work in with a congestion tax in the sense that, you know, the more you drive using a fossil fuel, the more you'll pay. But what we've done here, I think the 14 projects are pretty much the same that we started with, other than the big reductions in what would have gone to Mill Road and Penlink, and the reallocation of that money to mode shift. So that's pretty much where we're at. I do notice that, conscious of the comments made by the local boards, but the local boards were overwhelming in their support, as was the Regional Transport Committee. Councillor Casey's was probably the first comment. Are there any other comments that people would like to make? Oh, sorry.
Question about footpaths budget, which Michael's going to say.
Sorry, you started off by saying you had a comment to make, so I kind of took it as a comment as well as a question. Comments now, Councillor Hills.
Oh, sorry, Chair, it was a question.
Oh, okay. Question then.
It was actually a question from Councillor Darby, who's at AT's board. He's still unsure of the exact, and it's not actually listed, so it might not be part of the decision making. But Lake Road, there was numbers saying 52 million, and then 48, now 49. So is it supposed to be 52 million, or is that not actually part of this decision making today?
The actual decision making rolls that up to that road corridor improvements project. The latest numbers I have are around 49, but that is to be finalised. I think the key focus there is the finalisation through the Regional Land Transport Plan. And when that's finalised over the next month, that's when, you know, that is the process by which the amount of investment in projects is defined. This process, as the Mayor said, is about tagging funding to that investment.
So just the partial funding to the RFT as opposed to the whole project. Okay. And is that bundled in with the road ceiling and the Matakana link and others, that budget?
Yes, the road corridor improvement includes Lake Road, Lincoln Road, Glenvar Road, Matakana Link, and the road ceiling.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just double check one last time. Any more questions? Question, Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Just on the footpaths, the budget, I think I'm quite interested in finding out about that as well. As being a person who tripped, and I've still got an almost broken nose because of it. I think it's so if we could find out about that budget, but so this is for the region, the whole region. This fuel tax will go towards improving our footpaths. Is that right, or is it putting in new footpaths?
All this table shows is the areas where the regional fuel tax will be distributed between. This does not pretend to be the full transport program, most of which is obviously funded from other sources. So I don't see anything here that indicates footpaths, but that's not to say that we heard yesterday in a workshop that there was a 20 million boost to new footpaths going in, but this is only reflecting on one aspect, one slice of the funding, which is the regional fuel tax. You can't expect it to do everything, and of course it doesn't do everything.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Councillor Casey.
Active transport does actually mean walking. There is a line for it. That's why I raised it.
Yeah, yes, that's absolutely right, but I can't. I'm not sure whether we've got the right people in front of us to give us a breakdown of exactly how that is being spent. It is a discussion, as the Deputy Mayor has just suggested, that we had partially yesterday and will continue to have in regard to the RLTP when it comes to planning.
That's correct, yes.
That's a nice way of saying I don't know the answer to your question, Councillor. Okay, any comments that anybody would like to make? Otherwise, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Thank you very much to officers. And we now come to an important and heralded